Stephen hadn't planned to stay long. The cemetery was quiet, wrapped in a soft gray sky that matched his mood. He stood in front of his father's grave, hands in his coat pockets, staring at the name carved into cold stone. It had been years, yet the weight in his chest never truly faded. His father had been a distant man, strict, silent, and full of unspoken things. Stephen often wondered if he had ever really known him. As Stephen placed fresh flowers near the headstone, a sudden movement caught his attention. A woman stood a few steps away. She was dressed simply, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. Her head was lowered, her posture tense, as if she didn't want to be noticed. Stephen frowned. He had never seen her before, not once, and no one else in his family ever mentioned her. The strange part? She placed the flowers at his father's grave. Stephen watched quietly as she stood there longer than expected, whispering something under her breath. For a moment, he thought she was crying. Then, sensing someone behind her, the woman quickly stepped back. Their eyes met. Her face went pale. Without saying a word, she turned and walked away, almost rushing, as if she had done something forbidden. "Wait," Stephen called out instinctively. She stopped for half a second, then kept walking. Stephen stood frozen, confusion washing over him. Why would a stranger visit his father's grave? And why did she look so frightened when she saw him? Stephen glanced back at the headstone, his heart beating faster now. For the first time since his father's death, he felt something different. Not grief, but a growing sense that his father's story wasn't over yet. And that woman? She was the key to everything Stephen was about to discover. Stephen couldn't stop thinking about her. All night, the image of the mysterious woman replayed in his mind, the way her hands trembled as she placed the flowers, the fear in her eyes when she noticed him watching. By morning, the question haunted him, who was she, and why his father? 2 days later, Stephen found himself back at the cemetery. He told himself it was coincidence, that he was only there to clear his thoughts. But deep down, he was hoping. And then he saw her again. She stood near the same grave, this time earlier than before, dressed in dark clothes. In her hands was a different bouquet, roses this time, carefully arranged, as if chosen with meaning. She knelt slowly, touching the headstone with familiarity, like someone greeting an old friend. Stephen stayed hidden behind a nearby tree, watching. This wasn't random. No one visits a stranger's grave twice. She whispered something again, words Stephen couldn't hear, and wiped her eyes quickly, as if she didn't want to cry where anyone could see. When she stood up, she looked around nervously, scanning the empty cemetery. Stephen stepped forward. She noticed him immediately. Her body stiffened. "I'm sorry," Stephen said gently. "I don't mean to scare you." She swallowed hard. I shouldn't be here." "But you are," Stephen replied. "And this is my father's grave." The color drained from her face. "I knew this would happen," she whispered. Stephen felt a knot tighten in his chest. "You knew my father?" The woman hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. "Better than you think." She turned away, taking a step back as if she might run again. "Please," Stephen said. "If you know something about him, I deserve to know." She shook her head. "Some truths are meant to stay buried." Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she added something that made Stephen's heart stop. "Your father saved my life." Before Stephen could ask another question, the woman walked away, slower this time, but still refusing to look back. Stephen stood alone, stunned. Saved her life? His father had never told him anything like that. Stephen stared at the grave, realizing one painful truth. The man he thought he knew had lived a life filled with secrets. And the answers were walking away from him, one step at a time. Stephen didn't plan to follow her. But his legs moved before his mind could stop them. "Wait," he called out, his voice echoing through the empty cemetery. The woman slowed, her shoulders stiff, then finally turned around. Her eyes were red now, her face worn by emotions she had carried for years. "You shouldn't chase ghosts," she said quietly. "Then stop leaving them behind," Stephen replied. She looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing a decision that could change both their lives. Finally, she sighed and sat down on a nearby bench. "I promised myself I'd never speak," she said. "But he never wanted you to live in ignorance." Stephen's heart pounded. "Who are you?" She hesitated. "Someone your father protected, at great cost." Stephen clenched his fists. "You said he saved your life. From what?" Her hands trembled. She reached into her bag but pulled them back, as if afraid of what they might reveal. "Your father was not the man you remember," she said slowly. Not only. Stephen shook his head. You're wrong. He was strict, distant. He barely talked. The woman smiled sadly. Because he carried a burden meant to keep you safe. Stephen stood silent. She leaned forward. Years ago, your father made a choice. One that forced him to disappear from part of his own life. He chose silence, so others could live. Stephen felt anger rising. If he was such a hero, why hide it from me? Because heroes don't always want to be seen, she replied. Especially when the truth could destroy the people they love. Stephen's breath grew shallow. You're asking me to believe my father lived a secret life. She nodded. And you've only seen the surface. Stephen looked back toward the grave in the distance. All his life, he had believed his father was cold. Now he wondered if that coldness had been sacrifice. The woman stood up. I can't say more today. Stephen stepped forward. Then when? She met his eyes. When you're ready to hear the truth. She walked away slowly this time, leaving Stephen alone with a truth heavier than grief. His father wasn't just gone. He was a mystery waiting to be uncovered. Stephen didn't sleep that night. The woman's words echoed in his mind, repeating like a quiet storm he couldn't escape. He chose silence, so others could live. It didn't sound like the father Stephen remembered, the man who barely smiled, who avoided difficult conversations, who always seemed distant even when standing right in front of him. The next morning, Stephen returned to the cemetery. He didn't know why. Maybe he hoped she would be there again. Maybe he needed to face the grave with new eyes. She was waiting. This time, she didn't look surprised to see him. You came back, she said softly. I need answers, Stephen replied. Even if they hurt. She nodded slowly, as if she had expected that. Your father once told me you would ask that. They sat together on the same bench as before. The woman stared at the ground, gathering the courage she had avoided for years. Before your father married your mother, she began, he was involved in something dangerous. Something that put innocent people at risk. Stephen stiffened. What kind of danger? The kind that follows you home, she said. The kind that never lets go. She explained that Stephen's father had crossed paths with powerful people, people who didn't forgive mistakes. When someone close to him became a target, he made a decision that would change everything. He stepped in, she said quietly. Took the threat onto himself. Stephen's chest tightened. You? She nodded. He helped me disappear. New name. New life. He took the blame, the fear, so I could live. Stephen looked away, overwhelmed. His father had never spoken of fear, yet he had lived inside it. That's why he kept distance, she continued. The less people knew, the safer you were. Stephen swallowed hard. And all this time, he let me think he didn't care. Tears slipped down the woman's face. He cared more than you'll ever know. Stephen closed his eyes. For the first time, he understood that his father's silence wasn't emptiness. It was protection. And the truth was only beginning to unfold. The woman reached into her bag with trembling hands. This is why I came, she said. She pulled out a worn envelope, its edges softened by time. Stephen recognized his father's handwriting instantly. The sight alone sent a sharp ache through his chest. He made me promise, she continued, that I would never give this to you unless you were ready. Stephen hesitated, then slowly took the envelope. Inside were several letters, and a photograph. The photo showed his father, younger than Stephen had ever seen him, standing beside the woman. His arm was raised slightly, not touching her, but positioned protectively. His expression wasn't cold or distant. It was fierce. Loyal. Alive. The woman spoke through tears. Your father exposed people who hurt others. When they came after me, he didn't hesitate. He took responsibility for everything. Stephen's hands shook as he unfolded the first letter. If you are reading this, it means I failed to protect the silence forever. Stephen swallowed hard. The letter explained everything, how his father had stepped forward to take blame, how he had accepted a life of distance, constant fear, and emotional isolation so his family would never be touched. I became the villain in some eyes, the letter read, so you could grow up safe. Stephen felt his knees weaken. You don't understand, the woman whispered. He could have walked away. He chose not to. Stephen looked up at her, eyes burning. All those years. I thought he didn't love me. She shook her head. Every letter he wrote, every step he took, it was for you. Stephen pressed the letters to his chest. His father hadn't been absent. He had been brave in silence. And suddenly, the man Stephen thought he knew disappeared, replaced by someone far greater. A protector. A hero. A father who loved deeply, even when it cost him everything. Stephen sat alone that evening, the letters spread across the table like pieces of a life he had never known. Every word felt heavier than the last. His father had lived in fear, on purpose. He had chosen to be misunderstood, even resented, just so Stephen could grow up safe and free. The distance Stephen once blamed now felt like a shield, one he never saw, but always lived behind. Stephen remembered moments from his childhood. The quiet warnings. The strict rules. The constant concern disguised as coldness. They weren't signs of a distant man. They were signs of someone always watching the door. Tears rolled down Stephen's face, not from loss, but from understanding that came too late. He wished he had asked more questions. Wished he had listened between the silences. The woman's voice echoed in his head. He didn't want you to inherit his fear. Stephen clenched his fists. But he gave me his strength, he whispered. The next day, Stephen returned to the grave alone. He knelt down, placing the letters beside the headstone, his fingers brushing the engraved name with tenderness he had never shown before. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't see you." The wind moved softly through the trees, as if answering him. For the first time, Stephen didn't feel anger. He felt pride. Pride in a father who chose sacrifice over comfort. Pride in a love that asked for nothing in return. Stephen stood up with a new weight on his shoulders, not burden, but responsibility. The truth had changed him. He would live differently now. More openly. More courageously. More honestly. Because the greatest way to honor a man who lived in silence was to live in truth. Weeks passed, but the truth never left Stephen's mind. Instead of fading, it reshaped him. Stephen began visiting the cemetery regularly, not with heaviness, but with purpose. He cleaned the headstone, replaced the flowers, and sat quietly, speaking to his father as if the years of silence between them no longer existed. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Stephen noticed something strange. A small wooden plaque had been placed near the grave. A protector. A man of honor. Never forgotten. Stephen didn't know who left it. But he had a feeling. The mysterious woman never returned. No calls. No messages. No explanation. She vanished the same way she appeared, after delivering the truth she carried for a lifetime. Stephen finally understood why. Her role was never to stay. It was to reveal. The anger Stephen once felt toward his father was gone, replaced by a quiet respect that ran deeper than words. He began living differently, speaking up when he once stayed silent, protecting others the way his father had protected him. He volunteered. He forgave. He listened. And most importantly, he stopped judging love by how loudly it was expressed. Some love hides in silence. Some sacrifices leave no trace, until it's too late. Standing at the grave one final time, Stephen placed the letters into a sealed box and buried it beneath the soil. "Your secret is safe," he whispered. "But your legacy won't be." As he walked away, Stephen felt lighter. Not because the past was erased, but because it finally made sense. His father hadn't been distant. He had been brave in ways Stephen could only now understand. And that understanding changed Stephen's life forever. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that not every sacrifice is visible, and that sometimes the quietest love is the strongest, type legacy in the comments. Like the video if you believe truth deserves to be heard. Subscribe for more emotional stories that change how we see life. Because some stories don't just entertain us, they transform us.